Chosen one, God has a message for you right now. Be ready, because a new relationship is about to enter your life, and it will be unlike anything you have experienced before. Someone is being prepared specifically to cross your path, and if you are not ready when they appear, you may miss the connection God spent too long building. Stay with these words, because what you are about to hear will bring you to that moment ready. Type Amen in the comments if you believe God is preparing someone special to enter your life right now. You did not land on this video by accident, and what I am about to share is going to show you exactly why. After a season of relationships that left layers of doubt, hurt, and unanswered questions, I arrived at a place where I had quietly decided, without fully realizing it, that healthy love was for other people, not for me, until God began doing something I never asked for. Not sending me a person, but sending me a process that changed everything about what I was ready to receive. Drop a like right now. This simple action helps carry this message to another chosen one who needs to hear it today. There is a reason why every relationship that didn't work out happened exactly the way it did, and that reason is not bad luck, not poor timing, and definitely not evidence that you are somehow unworthy of love. Every relationship that ended, that hurt, that left you with more questions than answers, carried within it a specific lesson that needed to be learned before the right relationship could be not just found, but actually sustained. This is one of the most important reframes available to the chosen one, who is still carrying the weight of past relationships as evidence of personal failure. Because the moment you shift your interpretation of those relationships from failure to curriculum, from mistake to mandatory coursework, everything about how you see your past and your future changes simultaneously. The relationships that didn't work were not detours from your story. They were chapters in it, each one developing something in you that the previous one could not, each one revealing something about your patterns, your needs, your blind spots, and your capacity for love that you could not have accessed without going through exactly what you went through. The chosen one who understands this does not spend their energy grieving what didn't work. They spend it extracting what those relationships were designed to teach, because that extraction is the preparation for what is coming. I spent years looking at my past relationships as a collection of evidence against myself, as proof that something in me was fundamentally misaligned with the kind of love I was watching other people build and sustain in their lives. And that interpretation, which felt like honest self-assessment at the time, was one of the most damaging stories I ever told myself, because it was shaping not just how I felt about my past, but how I showed up in every subsequent attempt at connection. When you carry the belief that your relationship history proves something is wrong with you, you enter new relationships already defending against a verdict you have already reached about yourself. You over-explain, you overperform, you tolerate things you shouldn't, because somewhere beneath the surface, you are still operating from the assumption that this is the best available to someone like you. The breakthrough came not when I found a better person, but when I found a better interpretation of my history, when I stopped reading my past relationships as a diagnosis and started reading them as an education. And the moment I made that shift, what I was able to see in my own story changed completely, and what I was able to offer in a new relationship changed with it. Here is what the past relationships of a chosen one are actually designed to teach, and I want to be specific rather than general because specific is more useful. They teach you what you tolerate that you should not, the behaviors, the dynamics, the treatment that you accepted, because you were operating from a scarcity mindset that told you this was what was available, when in reality it was simply what was familiar. They teach you what you demand that is not fair, the expectations that were never about the other person, but about the unmet needs from much earlier in your life that you were unconsciously trying to resolve through romantic relationship. They teach you what you give too much of and what you withhold too carefully. The imbalances in how you love that become visible only in the context of a sustained relationship, where the patterns eventually surface regardless of how successfully they were managed in the early stages. And they teach you what genuine compatibility actually feels like versus what intensity disguised as compatibility feels like, a distinction that is almost impossible to make from the inside of an intense relationship, but becomes increasingly clear in the quiet that follows its ending. The chosen one who has learned these things, who has done the honest work of extracting the specific lessons from each past relationship rather than simply recovering from each one, arrives at the next relationship carrying something that cannot be manufactured any other way, the kind of wisdom that only experience produces. So sit with this question honestly and resist the temptation to give the answer that sounds most spiritually mature rather than the one that is most actually true. What is the single most important thing each significant past relationship taught you about yourself? Not about the other person, about you, about what you bring to a relationship, about what you need from one, about what you are capable of and what you still need to develop, about the patterns that repeat across different people and different circumstances, because they originate in you rather than in the people you have been with. Because the answer to that question, honest, specific, and unflinching, is one of the most valuable pieces of self-knowledge you will carry into the relationship that is coming. The chosen one, who knows what their past taught them, is not doomed to repeat it. They are equipped to recognize the difference between what was and what is about to be, and to show up for what is about to be as someone who has genuinely learned, genuinely grown, and genuinely arrived at a new place in their own story. Type 777. If you believe every past relationship prepared you for the right one that is coming, there is a temptation that is almost universal among people who are waiting for the right relationship, and it is one of the most quietly sabotaging patterns in the entire landscape of romantic hope. It is the tendency to focus enormous energy on finding the right person while investing very little energy in becoming the right person, as if the primary variable in the equation of a healthy relationship is the quality of who shows up rather than the quality of what both people bring to the encounter. But healthy relationships are not found the way you find a lost object that has been misplaced somewhere and simply needs to be located. They are built, constructed day by day, conversation by conversation, decision by decision, by two people who arrived at the encounter already having done sufficient work on themselves to be capable of building something that lasts. The chosen one who is entirely focused on finding the right person while neglecting the interior work that makes them ready to receive and sustain what they are looking for is like someone who has been searching for a door while standing in front of it. The obstacle is not external, it is internal, and no amount of searching in the right external places will compensate for the unaddressed internal work that determines what any relationship, however promising at the start, is ultimately capable of becoming. I spent a significant and humbling period of my life praying consistently for the right relationship while being in genuinely poor condition to sustain what I was asking for. My self-worth was fragmented in ways I was not fully aware of, which meant I was making choices from a baseline of what felt familiar rather than what was genuinely healthy. My boundaries were inconsistent at best and non-existent at worst, which meant that whatever I entered into would eventually be shaped more by what I was willing to tolerate than by what I actually deserved. My pattern of attraction was calibrated by unmet emotional needs from much earlier in my life, which meant that the people I found most compelling were frequently the people who were least suited to what I actually needed in a sustained relationship. And I was praying for the right person to arrive into all of that, as if the right person's presence would somehow resolve the underlying issues rather than simply provide a new context in which they would continue to express themselves. The shift that changed everything was not meeting someone better. It was becoming honest enough with myself to acknowledge that the work needed to happen in me before the relationship, not after it, and then doing that work with the same consistency and commitment that I had been bringing to the search for the right person. The interior work that needs to happen before the right relationship arrives is not a punishment for past failures or a prerequisite that God is imposing to prove your worthiness before He releases what He has already prepared. It is preparation, the specific targeted development of the internal capacities that a genuinely healthy relationship will require you to bring to it from day one. And it operates in several specific areas that are worth naming clearly. The first is self-worth, the deep, settled, genuinely held belief that you are worthy of love not because of what you offer or accomplish or present, but simply because of who you are, and that this worthiness is not something another person can give you or take away from you. The second is boundaries, the ability to know what you need, to communicate it clearly, and to hold it consistently, without either apologizing for having needs or weaponizing them as tests of the other person's love. The third is pattern recognition, the capacity to see your own recurring dynamics in relationships clearly enough to choose differently when the familiar but unhealthy option presents itself alongside the unfamiliar but healthier one. The chosen one who works on these three areas specifically will find that what they attract, what they accept, and what they are capable of sustaining in a relationship shifts in ways that make the arrival of the right person not just more likely, but genuinely possible for the first time. So here is the honest inventory I'm asking you to take, not as a discouraging audit of everything that still needs work, but as a compassionate, clear-eyed assessment of where the most important preparation still needs to happen before this relationship arrives. What do you believe at the deepest level about your own worthiness of genuine love? And is that belief something you have examined and chosen, or something you absorbed from experiences that were never qualified to tell you the truth about your value? Where are your boundaries currently, and are they functioning in a way that protects what matters most to you while still allowing genuine intimacy to develop? What patterns have repeated across multiple relationships, and have you done sufficient honest work to understand where those patterns originate and how to interrupt them before they establish themselves in a new context? These are not comfortable questions, but the chosen one who answers them honestly and acts on what the answers reveal will arrive at the right relationship as someone who is genuinely ready, not because they achieved perfection, but because they did the work that perfection was never going to be required to do. While you have been going through your own process of formation, while the interior work has been happening, while the lessons of past relationships have been revealing themselves, while God has been quietly reshaping how you see yourself and what you believe you deserve, something else has been happening simultaneously in a place you cannot see and with a person you have not yet met. That person has been going through their own process, their own painful seasons, their own lessons extracted from their own relationships that didn't work, their own interior work, done in their own private moments of honesty and surrender, producing in them the specific capacities and the specific character that complement what is being developed in you. Two parallel processes, happening in two separate lives, being guided by the same God toward the same point of convergence, not because he improvised a connection at the last minute, but because he designed the intersection long before either of you were aware that the other person existed or that a meeting between you was being prepared. The chosen one who grasps this, who understands that the weight is not the absence of something happening, but the presence of something being built simultaneously in two people who are not yet in each other's lives, experiences the waiting season completely differently. It stops feeling like nothing is moving and starts feeling like everything is moving, just not yet in the visible dimension. There is something that touches me deeply every time I contemplate how God constructs the relationships that are genuinely designed to last, and it is the level of intentionality involved, the complete absence of improvisation in a process that from the human side looks entirely random and often painfully uncertain. He does not connect two people who are still carrying unprocessed wounds from previous relationships and hope that their chemistry will compensate for the interior work that hasn't been done. He does not send the right person at the wrong time and expect the relationship to survive the mismatch between the quality of the connection and the readiness of the people in it. He works on both people simultaneously, addressing in each of them the specific things that would create friction in the relationship if left unaddressed, building in each of them the specific strengths that the other will need to draw on, removing from each of them the specific patterns and defenses and distortions that would prevent the genuine intimacy the relationship is designed to produce. And when both processes have reached the point that the relationship can begin from a foundation that gives it the best possible conditions for becoming what it was designed to be, then, and not before then, the meeting happens. The chosen one who understands this stops experiencing the timing of the right relationship as something arbitrary and starts experiencing it as something extraordinarily precise. The person being prepared for you is not perfect, and I want to say that clearly because the expectation of perfection is one of the most reliable ways to miss the right person when they actually arrive. Perfect does not exist in the human category. It is a standard that has never been met and will never be met by any person who could realistically enter your life. But right is a completely different category, and the difference between those two things is one of the most important distinctions the chosen one can internalize before they arrive at the moment of meeting. Right means formed, shaped by their own experiences and their own growth into someone whose character, whose values, whose direction in life, and whose way of moving through the world complements who you are becoming in a way that creates something neither of you could produce alone. Right means aligned, not identical, not without differences or tensions or areas that will require growth and communication and genuine effort, but fundamentally pointed in the same direction, building toward the same things, carrying the same core commitments about what a relationship is for and what it is meant to produce. The chosen one who releases the expectation of perfect and develops the discernment to recognize right will never miss the person God has been preparing because they were waiting for someone who doesn't exist. So here is what I want you to do with this understanding. Not just receive it as a comforting thought, but let it actively change how you experience the waiting. The next time the wait feels long, the next time the absence of the right person feels like evidence that God has forgotten about this area of your life, I want you to redirect your attention from what has not yet arrived to what is currently being built. Not just in you, in them. Somewhere right now, the person who is being prepared for you is going through something that is forming in them exactly what you are going to need them to bring to your life. Something that is building in them the character, the wisdom, the capacity for the specific kind of love that your specific life requires. They are being worked on with the same care and the same intentionality that God is bringing to your own process. The chosen one who can hold that awareness, who can trust the simultaneous formation of two people being prepared for a meeting that God has been planning since before either of them knew to ask for it, will experience the wait not as emptiness, but as anticipation of something that is genuinely, carefully, and precisely on its way. If you believe God is working on both you and the right person at the same time, type, "His timing is perfect" down below. The right person almost never arrives according to the script the chosen one wrote in their mind. During the waiting season, they do not necessarily look the way you imagined, arrive through the channel you were monitoring most carefully, or appear at the moment your internal timeline had designated as the appropriate arrival window. The picture you constructed during the waiting, the specific combination of characteristics, the particular circumstances of the meeting, the precise way the story was supposed to begin, is almost always at least partially wrong, not because God made an error in what he prepared, but because the picture was assembled by a version of you that was working with incomplete information about what you actually need versus what you currently want. And the gap between those two things, between what you want based on what has felt exciting before and what you need based on who you are genuinely becoming, is one of the primary reasons the right person can stand directly in front of a chosen one and not be immediately recognized as such. The excitement is not the signal, the chemistry is not the signal, the immediate, undeniable, "this is exactly what I pictured" feeling is not the signal. The signal is something quieter, something more settled, something that reveals itself not in the first moments of intensity, but in the sustained experience of being genuinely, consistently, peacefully yourself in the presence of another person, without the low-grade anxiety that has accompanied every previous attempt at connection. The most defining characteristic of the right relationship, the one that has never been consistently present in any previous relationship, and whose presence in this one is the clearest possible signal that something genuinely different is happening, is peace. Not the absence of feeling, not emotional flatness or the dullness of a connection that lacks energy, but the specific, settled, internally verifiable peace that comes from being with someone in whose presence you do not have to manage yourself, perform yourself, or protect yourself from being fully seen. I remember the specific quality of that peace when I first began to experience it, and what struck me most was how unfamiliar it felt, not because it was unpleasant, but because I had spent so long in relationships where the baseline was a kind of low-grade vigilance, a constant background monitoring of how things were going, that the absence of that vigilance felt almost disorienting at first. The chosen one who has been in relationships characterized by intensity, by uncertainty, by the kind of emotional turbulence that gets mistaken for passion, will need to recalibrate their sense of what love is supposed to feel like before they can accurately recognize peace as the signal it actually is. Because peace, to someone who has been trained by experience to associate love with anxiety, can initially feel like indifference. It is not. It is the experience of safety, and safety is what genuine love is actually built on. Learning to distinguish the peace of God from emotional excitement is one of the most practically important skills the chosen one can develop before the right person arrives, and it requires a level of honest self-awareness that is not always comfortable to cultivate. Excitement is loud. It arrives with intensity, with the specific rush of something new and promising and not yet fully known. It produces a desire to be around the person constantly, an elevation of mood in their presence, a sense of possibility that is genuinely pleasurable and genuinely real. But excitement is not a reliable indicator of compatibility, of character, of the kind of sustained goodness that a relationship requires to survive the inevitable seasons that are less exciting and more demanding. Excitement attaches to potential, peace attaches to reality. And the chosen one who makes their most significant relational decisions based primarily on excitement will consistently find themselves several months into a relationship that felt electric at the beginning, now navigating the revelation of what was actually there beneath the excitement all along. The right relationship will have both. It will have the genuine warmth and genuine enjoyment of someone you are drawn to, and it will have the peace that remains present, even when the newness has settled and the real work of knowing each other has begun. So here is the practical framework for recognizing the right person when they appear, and I offer it not as a checklist to be applied mechanically, but as a set of genuine questions to be asked with complete honesty in the early stages of a new connection. First, can you be fully yourself in their presence? Not the best version, not the managed version, but the actual, unedited, sometimes uncertain version, without feeling the need to perform or protect. Second, does the life they are building align with the direction God has been moving you? Not just their current circumstances, but their values, their commitments, their orientation toward the things that matter most in a sustained life together? Third, is the peace you feel about this person consistent? Does it remain present not just in the exciting moments, but in the ordinary ones, in the difficult conversations, in the moments when the relationship asks something of you that is genuinely costly? The chosen one who asks these questions honestly, who requires genuine answers rather than accepting the hopeful interpretations that desire tends to produce, will recognize the right person not because they match the picture, but because they produce the peace that the picture never could have captured. Relationships that God builds are not exempt from challenge, from difficulty, from the seasons that require genuine effort and genuine sacrifice, and the kind of honest communication that is uncomfortable in the moment, but essential to the long-term health of what is being built. Anyone who tells you otherwise is describing something that does not exist in the human category, a fantasy of effortless connection that sounds appealing but produces none of the depth that only navigated difficulty can create in a relationship. The difference between a God-built relationship and one constructed in haste, in need, or in the wrong timing is not the absence of challenge. It is the presence of a foundation that gives the relationship the structural integrity to navigate challenge without collapsing. A foundation built from two people who arrived at the relationship already having done sufficient interior work to bring their best rather than their most broken self to the hard moments. That foundation is what determines whether a difficult conversation brings two people closer or drives them further apart. Whether a season of external pressure reveals incompatibility or deepens the bond between people who have chosen each other deliberately and are not easily shaken by the normal difficulties of sharing a life. The chosen one who enters a relationship built on this kind of foundation will experience something in the hard moments that they have never experienced before. The discovery that difficulty, when navigated with the right person, produces intimacy rather than distance. The right relationship in my life was not the most intense one I had experienced, and I want to say that clearly because intensity is one of the most reliable misleaders in the entire landscape of romantic connection. It did not begin with the largest emotional impact or the most dramatic chemistry or the kind of immediate all-consuming feeling that gets romanticized in culture as the indicator of something significant. What it had from very early on was a quality of solidity that none of the more intense relationships had ever produced. The experience of building on rock rather than on sand, where every conversation that was difficult left us more connected rather than more uncertain, where every challenge that arose revealed more compatibility rather than more incompatibility, where the person I was with at month 6 was more known and more chosen and more genuinely loved than the person I was with at week 1 rather than less. The chosen one who has been in relationships where the intensity was highest at the beginning and gradually diminished as reality replaced projection will recognize this pattern immediately as something qualitatively different. Because in a relationship built on the right foundation, the depth increases with time rather than decreasing, and the love that develops at month 6 is not less exciting than what existed at week 1. It is simply more real, and real is infinitely more valuable than exciting. What will be genuinely different about this new relationship, different in ways that you will notice immediately and that will become increasingly undeniable as time passes, is the quality of freedom it produces in you. Not freedom from commitment or from the beautiful demands of loving another person well, but the specific freedom of someone who is fully known and fully chosen simultaneously, who does not have to manage their presentation or protect their vulnerabilities or perform a version of themselves that is more acceptable than the actual one. In every relationship where the foundation was wrong, there was always a background effort, sometimes subtle, sometimes exhausting, of being the version of yourself that the relationship required, rather than simply being who you actually are. The right relationship dismantles that effort. It creates the specific safety in which the full, unmanaged, genuinely present version of you can exist without the anxiety that it will be too much or not enough, or somehow incompatible with what the other person signed up for. The chosen one who experiences this for the first time will recognize it immediately, not because it matches anything they imagined love would feel like, but because the absence of the familiar effort reveals just how much energy they had been spending on that effort in every previous relationship without fully realizing it. Prepare yourself for a love that does not require drama to feel significant, because one of the most important recalibrations the chosen one needs to make before the right relationship arrives is their internal definition of what love is supposed to feel like. If your reference points for romantic love have been relationships characterized by uncertainty, by push and pull, by the specific intensity that comes from never being quite sure where you stand, then peace and consistency and the quiet, reliable presence of someone who is genuinely there may initially feel underwhelming rather than profound. This is one of the most important things to be aware of as this new relationship begins, because the temptation to interpret consistency as boring, to interpret peace as lack of passion, to interpret reliability as less exciting than the uncertainty you are accustomed to, has caused more chosen ones to walk away from the right relationship than almost any other single factor. The right love is not louder than what came before it. It is deeper. It is not more dramatic than what came before it. It is more real. And real, chosen freely and sustained faithfully by two people who arrived ready for it, is the most profound experience of love available to a human being who has done the work to be able to receive it. There is something that blocks healthy relationships from entering a person's life with far greater frequency than the simple absence of available people, and it operates so quietly and so consistently beneath the surface of conscious awareness that most people never identify it as the actual obstacle. It is unresolved baggage, the accumulated weight of past relationships that was never fully processed, never fully grieved, never fully released, and that therefore travels invisibly into every new connection, shaping what is noticed, what is tolerated, what is trusted, and what is sabotaged before it ever has the chance to become what it was capable of becoming. This baggage does not announce itself. It does not arrive at the beginning of a new relationship, wearing a sign that says, "I am the reason this is going to be more difficult than it needs to be." It operates through projection, the unconscious assignment of past people's patterns to new people who have not yet done anything to deserve that assignment. It operates through hypervigilance, the exhausting scanning for signs of the specific hurts that previous relationships produced, finding them even in situations where they are not actually present. It operates through the premature withdrawal that happens when a new connection begins to feel genuinely promising, because something beneath the surface is more afraid of being hurt again than it is willing to acknowledge, and self-protection activates before the threat is real. The chosen one who has not done the work of identifying and addressing their specific unresolved baggage will bring it, invisibly and unintentionally, into the right relationship, and will find that what they bring shapes the experience of that relationship in ways that have nothing to do with the person they are in it with. I entered new relationships carrying the full unprocessed weight of previous ones for longer than I am comfortable admitting, and I want to describe what that actually looked like from the inside, because I think the description might help you recognize the same pattern in yourself. I projected onto new people the specific behaviors of old ones, reading innocent actions through the lens of past betrayals, interpreting normal human imperfection as confirmation of fears that had been formed in completely different circumstances with completely different people. I closed down at exactly the moments that genuine connection required me to open up, because the vulnerability of opening up was associated in my nervous system with the pain that had followed it in previous relationships, and my self-protective instincts could not yet distinguish between the context that had been genuinely unsafe and the new context that was not. And I sabotaged things that were building into something real, through withdrawal, through the creation of unnecessary distance, through the testing behaviors that masquerade as standards, but are actually fear performing as discernment. Every single one of these patterns had nothing to do with the new person. They were the residue of previous relationships being played out in a new setting, and until I identified them clearly enough to interrupt them consciously, they ran automatically, determining outcomes in my relationships that I blamed on external factors, while the actual cause was entirely internal. The beliefs that a chosen one carries about love, and about their own worthiness of it, are among the most powerful forces operating in their relational life, and they are powerful precisely because they operate beneath the level of conscious thought. They are not opinions that were formed through deliberate reflection. They are conclusions that were drawn from experience, often painful experience, and that were then encoded into the operating system of how the person moves through subsequent relationships without ever being examined or questioned. Beliefs like relationships always end painfully, so the right response to something promising is to not get too invested. Or people always leave eventually, so the only real protection is to maintain enough emotional distance that the leaving doesn't destroy you. Or love always comes with conditions, so the version of you that shows up in relationships should be the most acceptable version rather than the most authentic one. These beliefs feel like wisdom because they were formed in response to real pain. But they are not wisdom. They are wounds that have been intellectualized, and they block the right relationship not by keeping the wrong people out, but by preventing the right person from ever encountering the full, open, genuinely available version of the chosen one they were designed to connect with. So here is the work, the specific, honest, sometimes uncomfortable work that the chosen one needs to do before this relationship arrives. And I want to name it as concretely as possible because vague encouragement to do the inner work produces far less than specific direction about what that work actually involves. First, identify the beliefs you carry about love and about your own worthiness of it. Write them down if you need to, because seeing them in writing rather than allowing them to operate invisibly in your thinking makes them significantly easier to examine and to challenge. Second, identify the specific patterns that have repeated across multiple relationships, the behaviors, the dynamics, the points of breakdown that seem to follow you from one connection to the next, and do the honest work of tracing them back to their origin rather than continuing to attribute them to the people you have been with. Third, grieve what needs to be grieved. Not indefinitely, not as a way of staying connected to the past, but as a necessary completion of the emotional process that allows the past to be genuinely past rather than a permanent presence in your present. The chosen one who does this work, who shows up at the right relationship with their baggage examined, their patterns identified, and their capacity for genuine intimacy restored, will find that what they are capable of building with the right person is something they could not have built even with the right person before this work was done. Before Isaac found Rebekah, Abraham sent a servant on a specific mission. Before Ruth found Boaz, she was working faithfully in the field. Before every great love story in Scripture, someone was living fully in their purpose during the waiting, not sitting still, not existing in a holding pattern until the right person arrived to make their life feel complete, but moving, growing, building, being wholly themselves in the season before the meeting. The chosen one who is waiting for the right relationship is not being asked by God to wait passively. They are being asked to live so fully, so intentionally, so completely in who they actually are and what they are genuinely called to, that the right person is attracted not to a version of them that was constructed to be appealing, but to the real, fully inhabited, purposefully lived version that only emerges when someone stops organizing their life around finding love and starts organizing it around becoming who they were made to be. Take care of your emotional health now. Invest in your friendships now. Advance in your purpose now. Become the person you would want to attract, not as a strategy, but as a genuine commitment to your own wholeness. And you will find that what changes is not just who you attract, but what you are capable of building with them when they arrive. Chosen one. God said, be ready. And now you understand what being ready actually means. Not perfect, not without scars but whole, with the interior work done, the right beliefs in place, and a heart that is open and discerning at the same time. Close your eyes and say it out loud. God, I am ready. I open my heart without fear. Send who you have prepared for me, in your timing, in your way. I trust you. Amen. If this reached you today, it wasn't by accident. Drop a like. It helps this word find another chosen one who is waiting for the right relationship to enter their life. Subscribe and turn on the bell. What's coming next is for those ready to receive love, purpose, and every blessing God has been preparing for their next season. One word. Tell me what you felt. I read every single one.